Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Git.Small. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum. Hey everybody, welcome to the Ready Layer 2 podcast. This is Git.Small, and I'm sitting here with Hunter from Offchain Labs and Eli DeFi from the Arbitrum Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to get to know you guys a little bit better, dig into your roles, and certainly we're going to be focusing a lot on the foundation. Odyssey Reignited, one of the main reasons we're getting together here today, so we're going to dive into all that. Before we do, just a little bit of context for everybody. Both of you work at different organizations. We're going to break that down a little bit about the various organizations that have a role here in the ecosystem. So let's start with you, Hunter. Why don't you give us just a little bit of background on yourself and Offchain Labs?
For sure. Obviously, by the way, thanks for having us on. But yeah, as I mentioned, my name is Hunter. I do community strategy at Offchain Labs today. But yeah, when I first joined Offchain Labs about 2 years ago, plus some months, I was doing community management and essentially was like the only quote unquote marketing person, pretty much actually up until Eli joined. As crazy as that sounds, which was literally like last year or so. But yeah, no, it's been a blast, frankly, like working at Offchain Labs, helping build a community from the ground up, seeing the foundation being formed, and of course, to have the community growth go from literally just Offchain Labs 2 years ago to now being Offchain Labs, the Arbitrum Foundation, the Arbitrum DAO, and honestly, people like yourself get. I remember like when I first stumbled upon your podcast, I'm like, yo, there's someone out there just has a podcast just about layer 2 stuff. That's sick.
Nice.
That's great to see it.
So thanks for that. Thanks for taking the time today. I appreciate it. And Eli, same question for you.
Yeah, so I'm the community lead at the Arbitrum Foundation. And as Hunter mentioned, I first joined last year at Offchain Labs as a community manager. And yeah, started at the foundation in March, basically once the token launched and the DAO and everything launched as well.
All right, very cool. And what is the role of the community manager? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
The community lead and community manager is very similar in nature. I guess at the foundation, as a community lead, I work with all of the community managers globally. So right now we have 2 officially in the foundation, one in Mexico and one in Hong Kong. So the goal there is to help extend the reach globally and regionally to grow the Arbitrum ecosystem, whether it's through governance, developer workshops, side events, just like fun meetups, things like that, just a way to help facilitate that growth, because you can only do so much virtually and async. It really helps to have people on the ground in different places. And as a foundation, it doesn't make sense to have our whole community team localized in one area. I'm in Canada, so it's a nice spot to oversee things globally and then having people in pockets of the world. And then we even started onboarding community admins or moderators into the community who can take that even further in another way through the community online. And then one of them's in Portugal and another one is in Nigeria. So you can see how this web starts to get created with a community team. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sitting here in the US, obviously I know that crypto's worldwide and Arbitrum's worldwide, not necessarily always thinking about the conscious effort that has to go into building that community everywhere. And everybody's got slightly different priorities. There's different languages, there's all different stuff like that. So I imagine like all of that probably complicates your role quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you can be the biggest expert in Web3 or community building or anything around those things, but you still don't know what the Ethereum community in Mexico feels like if you're not there in the thick of it. And right when Anna joined, for example, in April, she immediately had a connection with so many small governance groups in Latin America, even in Spain, which is on the other side of the world. And it just made it so easy to facilitate conversations. And it made it really easy for me to help them help the Arbitrum ecosystem.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, as you've gotten to know the different communities around the world, has there been any big surprises for you in terms of what people are, what they're here for, or what's driving them, what's influenced them? Is any big differences that you've seen out there?
So far, I would say in the LATAM region, it's very builder-centric, a lot of developers, and a lot of them are super bullish on scaling solutions, and a lot of them just want to scale Ethereum. There's a lot of ETH maxis from what I've seen. Use the term maxi loosely there, but just people who are very passionate about the space and what it's done so far and inevitably what it can do.
And how does that differ from, say, like the U.S. market or, other pockets of the world?
So my experience, and Hunter will have more because he's US based, but in North America, it feels like there's a lot more. A lot of it stems more from the universities, and as well there's a lot of like migration of TradFi people into DeFi in the North American markets as well. Hunter, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's actually been very interesting. I guess my previous thought of like involvement on the university side in North America was a lot more than it actually is. But I guess it really just depends on what you count as involvement in crypto more specifically. I think when I was doing my research a couple months ago, I think there are like maybe eight universities that are actually active in governance, like university-based blockchain clubs, I should say. But there's obviously a ton more, right? And I'm talking about around the world. There's like roughly 8, like they're actually active. But I'm starting to see, like as time goes on, as more conversations are being made between these university clubs and us, is that a lot of them want to get involved, they just don't know how. Like DAOs generally, I think it's like something that you really need to be committed to, like actually trying to be part of, number one. But number two, like I think the other thing that maybe a lot of people don't consider, and I think it's why there aren't that many blockchain university-based clubs doing it, is because it's also just legal implications of like having like a university org. Essentially
Sure.
being like, you have some that are like, for example, like breakdance clubs or something. Then you have this other one, it's blockchain based and happens to hold like $1 million worth of X token. It's like governing.
It complicates things a bit.
It's a problem that never existed before crypto. So it's very interesting.
So thinking about the different organizations at play here, obviously you're from Offchain Labs, Hunter, and I think of you guys as a technology, basically a big development shop or as a development shop. You built Arbitrum, launched into the world, started this whole movement, if you will. Is that a fair characterization of you guys as a development shop? Am I oversimplifying? How would you describe it?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I'd almost consider Offchain Labs like a software as a service company, almost like
Okay.
that. We build out Arbitrum-based technology. A couple of things, for example, that we shipped recently was like Bold, permissionless validation for Arbitrum chains, the whole idea of Orbit chains, like layer 3s on top of Arbitrum public chains, as well as Stylus, which is like the ability to write smart contracts in like Rust, C or C++ on an Arbitrum chain. So like a couple of those things we've recently shipped, all of course, like, and this is definitely where the confusion comes. While all that stuff is built out for Arbitrum chains, let's say if you wanted to launch your own customized chain tomorrow, like your own Orbit chain, and you wanted to put Stylus on it and all that, you could do that right away, right? But if you wanted to put that on Arbitrum One, Arbitrum Nova, it's not like we can just say, okay, hey guys, let's just upgrade the chain real quick. Back in the day, maybe, but now that the DAO actually has
Right.
control over One and Nova, all that stuff essentially needs to go through a governance vote, similar to how any of these other past governance votes have gone through the forums, snapshot, and then of course on-chain via tally. So yeah.
Yeah, right on. And that's the move towards decentralization. That was the whole point. So that brings
For sure.
in the DAO and the foundation. So Eli, can you tell us what role in all of this does the Arbitrum Foundation play?
The simplest way to explain the foundation is that it's a steward to the DAO. So whatever goes on in the DAO from a proposal side that passes through voting, the foundation is there to help give awareness to those proposals that passed, help connect the people who initiated those proposals with any infrastructure or tools or anything that would help them achieve the proposal and take it to where it's meant to go. So that's like the simplest level to explain it at.
Okay. Very cool.
DAO is the brains, the foundation can function as the arms way.
Yeah, execution level, almost like the chief operating officer and the old C-level suite, if you would, the ones that actually go out and move it along. So that makes sense, at least as like a high-level metaphor for it. And the DAO basically is everybody that holds the ARB tokens, and they can submit proposals and do all that stuff, but at some point a decision is made. Foundation helps steward it along. But also throughout all of this, the foundation is generally trying to raise awareness of the chain and the activities going on here and whatnot. And that brings us to things like the Odyssey. So let's talk a little bit about that. Obviously, an older initiative from a year or so ago, year plus ago, actually was the thing that made me come into Arbitrum and start checking things out in the first place. But it got paused and now it's coming back. So let's just tell me about the history of it, and I'm really interested to understand why bring it back now.
It's funny because this was such a different time in crypto. This was not right after, but this was like after the small brains hype. After obviously Arbitrum was pretty much known as like the kind of like the DeFi chain, quote unquote, and like Treasure was essentially like this gaming behemoth that attracted a lot of people over to Arbitrum. But nonetheless, I think one thing that we've always had since the jump as like part of, I think, our values was that at least as marketing went, the ecosystem was essentially the marketing arm for Arbitrum. Considering there was no marketing essentially up until, like, at the very least, up until Eli joined essentially. Like marketing was essentially just me and like someone else from, I should say Nina. And that's a pretty horrible marketing team. It's a pretty good community team, but a horrible marketing team. So we figured, okay, why not leverage the brand that GMX has already, the brand that Treasure has already, as well as every other project who joined, because essentially our Arbitrum was just another chain for people to deploy on. And the only way in my mind to make a difference was to really give like as much as we can, I should say, the teams on the chain as much love and support, et cetera, as possible. So that's where the Odyssey came in. The idea was essentially to just show out the different projects that existed on Arbitrum, get them involved in this interesting initiative, and reward users for trying them out essentially. I think it's funny because looking back at it, it's crazy how big it became, and even today, right? Like it was literally started today with GMX. It was like literally the entire industry followed the trend, and it was just supposed to be like this kind of small idea that Nina and I are supposed to come up with. But so the whole idea of bringing it back was that, first of all, there were a ton of teams. I think it was like 13 or 14 teams that won the community vote to be part of the Odyssey. So it would feel like kind of a rug if the foundation just never brought it back.
Just never closed it back. Yeah, gotta close the loop.
It was paused. It wasn't ended completely. Obviously, it was at the end of the day up to the foundation to restart it, because when we initially launched it, the foundation didn't exist. It was just Offchain Labs. But yeah, so today I think the idea was, and I'm sure Eli can speak more to it if you want, it was to definitely bring it back with the foundation's approval, and to also try to show support for the other projects that have launched on Arbitrum since then, because there are obviously a ton. I think you check DeFi Llama, it's like 450 or something. And that's where you'll see a bunch of projects now launching ecosystem side missions alongside the Odyssey. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's like Arbitrum is nothing without the projects living on it. And I think that's what the Odyssey embodies.
Yeah, I think it was kudos to you and Nina for coming up with the scheme, because it was pretty brilliant, really, in its simplicity. And for me, the reason why I got excited about it was because I didn't know, I was fairly new to crypto in general at that point, but I didn't do anything in Arbitrum or L2s. And it was like a roadmap for me. I just wanted to come and experiment. And effectively, I looked at it as a list of safe experiments to go do, right? And also, I don't have to think about what to try because you're going to tell me, and that's going to give me some exposure. And that's how I looked at it and what I got excited about. So yeah, I think it could still do that for a lot of folks going forward here.
Yeah, so I think what's important to clarify as well is with the first Odyssey program that launched, the one that congested the crap out of the network and had to be paused. Obviously, that was pre-Arb governance token and DAO, so the airdrop speculation was very high and warranted, I guess you could say. But this time around, we can officially say there is no airdrop associated with this program. And then people might ask, oh, what's the point? We're just getting useless badges that are just basically like stamps on a blockchain, like adventure passport, which to some people is great. Like people like to showcase that, but really we're trying to get new users into Arbitrum as well, right? It's not like the DAO launched and let's just have all the same people use Arbitrum forever. No, there needs to be growth always.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's one of the top projects on Arbitrum today. There are people who probably have still never used GMX, or believe it or not, there will be people who don't know who it is. And that's as simple as it's your first week in Web3 and you're fortunate enough to see that you can use Arbitrum to basically use Ethereum. And then you jump on there in your first week. You've used your wallet like once maybe to bridge on ramp. And then you're like, oh, cool. Like here's 7 weeks of stuff I can try in between my busy life, because most people don't just join the Web3 space and are full-time into it right away.
Right.
You have to ease yourself into it. So yeah, it's just a great way to onboard new users and also respect the existing users by continuing the program that was initially paused.
Yeah, I think that's obviously an important point, is to just close the loop on that, like promise made, if you will. So is the list of projects that are part of the Odyssey this time is the exact same list that was voted on for the first, or before it was paused, I should say?
Yeah, I think there's a couple differences, Hunter.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Like the only difference you'll see is if a team either A, dropped out, or just B, to be honest, just isn't around anymore. That's it.
Yeah, which a year in crypto, obviously somebody's doesn't exist anymore, I'm sure. That'd be pretty typical. And then you mentioned people starting off side quests. So that was one of the things I'm curious about here is for the founders who are listening on this that maybe were founded since then or just weren't part of it last time around. Is there a way for them to take advantage of what's going on?
Yeah, 100%. There's already 3 side missions from the ecosystem on the Arbitrum portal that is being showcased to follow the whole campaign. Yeah, it's at the bottom of the Odyssey landing page on portal.arbitrum.
Okay, very cool. I didn't catch that. What are the 3 projects that are on there?
Right now, there's Timeless Finance, Bunny, and I'm Token from what I can see on the side missions. And then you can click them and it takes you right to their own campaign. And I know there's probably a couple other ones out there that will be added as well that are in progress.
All right, very cool. What's the process for somebody who's interested in creating a sidechain activity like that? Is there a way for them to reach out to the foundation?
Yeah, no, it's essentially just that. Whether it's the foundation, we can also reach out to myself. I'll make sure that I get everything updated on the portal. But it's honestly pretty low lift. As long as the project is listed on the portal, then essentially the campaign, barring like 1 or 2 things, should be able to just be listed there.
What's the process for getting listed on the portal in the first place?
Right on the homepage of the portal, because the portal got revamped also recently. We put out a blog post about it.
Yeah, I saw that. Looks great. You guys did a
yeah,
nice
in the
job
top right corner of the homepage of the portal, it just says add your project. You click it and it opens up a form, a Google form, and you start by just saying what type of project you have. And based on the type of project you choose, you'll get a different series of questions that follows. And it's just, the full disclaimer is there's no 100% way to protect the community from a project that maybe they just run out of money at some point and their project closes down. Maybe it actually is a rug, but you just don't know until 3 years later. That happens all the time. So this is just a way to help reduce risk and some type of onboarding procedure without like aggressively gatekeeping. You obviously want to allow the users to make the decisions themselves.
Yeah, certainly important, but a great service of 1, discovery, right? If I'm looking for new tools, there's a place I can go and find them. 2, making sure that I'm going to the right pages, right? Because that's hurdle number 1 a lot of times in this space is just making sure that you didn't get jacked with a fake URL and end up on a copycat drainer site or something silly like that. So another great service is that you can go there and at least make sure that you're landing on the right place. But
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
Similar to the Odyssey, but in a more long-term and grand way. The portal is just that. It's how many people you think about when your first month in crypto, and likely it was on Ethereum, maybe depending when you joined, but you, aside from the top coins by market cap, you had no idea where to explore beyond that within different areas. I hadn't seen anything like this on a chain to this wide degree. When I first joined and I saw there was this portal, it's basically like a large glossary or index, and I immediately clicked on gaming, and then I clicked on bridges because I wanted to see what other ways you could bridge. It just really gave an easy way to see some of these projects and explore.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, great tool for people who are just exploring, like you said that. And the same with the Odyssey. Like I said, that was why I got excited about it, because I'm an explorer and I wanted to come and try things out, but I didn't know what to try. So having a list or a roadmap was perfect for that. So it'll still serve that purpose. And yeah, like you said, no airdrop lure this time. So there might be less incentive for just straight up airdrop hunters to come, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not necessarily who we're going for here, I imagine. Or going for people who want to come and use the tools and help build the ecosystem. So yeah, I think that's fine. Your numbers get smaller when you take that type of approach, but they get more meaningful at the same time. So I think that's all good.
Yeah, and we're noticing that in the Discord, it's not as, we were prepared for it to be as hectic, but it hasn't been as hectic. And that's like a signal of how, more real the people are trying it around this time. Maybe there's always going to be botting, like people will speculate and do what they can to maximize that. That's not our goal here. And you can track it in a lot of different ways. You can see basically how many people did it, how many badges went out to unique addresses. You can even look at the weekly, or on the whole 7 weeks, you'll be able to check how many new wallet addresses were added to Arbitrum before and after, and if that number was higher, and daily transactions. There's so many different metrics you can check out, and it's endless basically.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. We'll link all that stuff up in show notes for people to dig in if they haven't already. But there's lots of stuff going on in the ecosystem right now. The other thing that I wanted to touch with you on is the Security Council elections. Obviously, huge component of the foundation and really important role in all of this. Can you just let the listener know what exactly is the Security Council?
Yeah, basically, so the Security Council is a council for the Arbitrum DAO to basically there'll be 12 members, and they're divided into two cohorts of 6 that are up for re-election in every, I believe, 6 months or 2 quarters or something like that. I'll double check the docs, but yeah, it is in cohorts of 6. Basically, they're in charge of like emergency and non-emergency interactions with the chain. We outlined that in the blog as clearly as we could. Obviously, new things will arise as we discover it through the DAO, but it's a 9 of 12 multi-sig for emergency, and I believe a 7 out of 12 for non-emergency. And that's just something that is urgent enough that you don't want it to go through like the 4-week process of being a forum proposal, then doing a temperature check on Snapshot, and then an on-chain vote. It's for things that the DAO needs to act on a lot faster. The Security Council can be that support for the DAO to execute something a lot faster.
Yeah, right on. That makes total sense. And then they are ultimately accountable to the DAO. And in the event that they execute something under either emergency or not emergency, there's
it's a lot of responsibility and accountability. And you technically have to be somewhat available on a daily basis, which is challenging because all these people likely have full-time jobs on top of that.
Sure. And imagine they're probably distributed around the world as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just an easy task. Oh, sweet, I can get an annual salary to just sit on this council passively. You have to think a little more risk profile than that because you're also public now, like who you are and what you do. And if you do make a decision that rubs people the wrong way, there's a lot of like cause and effect there. So I think we should not underestimate the courage it takes to be on a Security Council and how important it is to have these people thoroughly vetted and elected through the DAO.
Right on. And that's the process that's happening right now is the current cohort, round 1, I don't know if I use all the right words, but the first stage of that has been completed. And now like the foundation's role in this, as I understand it, is to do compliance checks and all of that stuff to make sure that they are okay to be in that role. What is that process that's going on right now? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. So round 1 just finished at the end of last week. It was a week long. We're realizing that maybe next time around it should probably be longer than a week. It felt very tight to get awareness for everyone to vote in time and vet these candidates. But that's part of the learning process always.
Sure.
And yeah, I believe we released some of the stats on it yesterday. I believe I posted it. It was basically there's 24 candidates that got moved on to round 2 for the election. And over these next 2 weeks, before October 6th, which is when round 2 starts, the foundation will be doing compliance checks with all of the candidates. It's not like they're going to be public KYCs and stuff like that, but it is a necessary compliance check.
Yep. Okay. Very cool. And then that process coming out there'll be a round 2 vote, and then that cohort will come and take over. Now, knowing that we're talking to founders and builders in the community, what do you think is important for them all to know about this, or just be thinking about this, or why is it important to them, and why should they care?
Yeah. So if these founders are building on Arbitrum or Ethereum, then it's really important for the blockchains that they're building on to be as secure and decentralized as possible. Otherwise, they would probably be building somewhere else other than here. And having a Security Council that founders helped vote in or not vote in is a big part of the shared responsibility. Because we talked a lot about the responsibility of the Security Council, but let's not forget the responsibility of the voters. There's going to be all sorts of types of opinions when it comes to voting. It's an open system there. Somebody could just have enough delegated power to vote their friend into the council through a round, right? That's not something you can stop. There'll be, again, some cause and effect there based on, you can see who voted for who, how many tokens were delegated. It's a pretty transparent system. And Tally helped us develop a hopefully simple and clean UI for people to follow the rabbit hole of how the Security Council came to be. Because there'll be case studies on like how the voting went down, who voted for who swayed the votes the most, why they did it, things like that. And obviously the foundation won't have as much of a hand in that, but it'll still be interesting and give some interesting statistics or data on how to approach it every further election.
Got it. Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that founders should be thinking of themselves more as an extension of this ecosystem rather than just an app running in it or on it. Because I don't know, I spend most of my time in the Web 2 world building, and I didn't really think too hard about the rules of the internet. I know there people are, and that's important, but a lot of that stuff I could pretty much just not worry about, and it was going to be there for me. And if I built an app and I launched it, it was going to work. And this is a little bit different. This is like you're closer to the machine, if you will. And if you're not paying attention to it, things could happen that you don't expect. Is that a fair characterization of it, do you think, for a founder?
Yeah, I do think there's no formula to this or right or wrong, but I do think that if you are building on a chain and that chain is governed by a DAO, you should always participate in it, whether even if you're not voting, at least being 100% aware of everything that could have implications on what you're building, because it comes down to economics at the end of the day. If you're building on this chain and the chain is growing and the users are growing, your app should be growing as well. And if it's not, then how can you leverage the growth of the chain to help your own project grow?
Yeah, right on.
I'd love to add, by the way, I think I have an analogy, and you can let me know if it makes sense or not. But I think the way I see it is that, okay, the chain essentially is like a city or a town. And the dApps that build on it are like businesses. As a business, you like have a vested interest to make sure that the laws being passed within the city or town that you live in are A, beneficial to whatever you're doing, whatever you're selling, whatever your product is, but also B, make sure that they're not detrimental to yourself as a business, right? You could claim to not care for as long as you want, but then once, let's say a law gets passed, then maybe now for some reason, like you're not selling as much product as you used to because of who knows why, you can't get all pissed off because you weren't part of it in the first place. And I think that's what early on I was a little bit like, I was a little like vocal on Twitter about it, because I just saw a bunch of people saying, oh, the DAO's not moving quick enough. The DAO's not doing anything. And I'm like the DAO is you, essentially.
Yeah, so step
right?
up, right? Yeah, I saw some of those tweets and I agreed.
So yeah, and obviously as someone from Offchain Labs, Eli, of course, from the foundation, like there's very limited things we can do. Frankly, we're like almost not involved in the DAO at all. Like obviously the foundation service providers to the DAO, we help the foundation to a certain extent with operations. But like the DAO is fully and totally controlled by the people who hold ARB, which are essentially the community members. I would never tell people to like quote unquote like shut up and step up. But like it's kind of what I was saying to a certain extent in a very, very nice way.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. And I think your analogy works. I definitely matched the model that was building up in my head through all the explanation here today. And yeah, I'd say on one hand, don't sit back and do nothing and then complain about it. But on the other hand, too, if you're building an app or a protocol and you're taking in your customers' money and like it's getting locked up in there or whatever, there's value accruing in your platform. And then that all gets blown up by something that happened that you weren't aware of. You fudged your responsibility to your customers too and to your users. So I think it's both. It's don't complain, but also if you're going to have users on this thing, you got a responsibility to make sure you know what's going on at that level too. Good analogy. I think that works. So other stuff going on with the foundation. Obviously, there's a grant program or grants opportunities here. So let's talk a bit about that. Again, perspective of the founder, someone who wants to build or is building. What opportunities are out there?
So first, I guess I'll clarify. There's the Arbitrum Foundation Grants program, which is in phase 1 right now. It started in end of July. That one is fully run and implemented through the foundation and its DAO appointed treasury, which is vested monthly through an AIP that was passed a while back. And then the DAO itself can have as many grant programs as people vote in. So I believe right now there's three of them running or some forms of incentive programs behind them as well to encourage DAO participation. But that's all through the DAO. The foundation's, the extent of the foundation there is, as I mentioned before, stewarding. We provided a stage on our X Spaces for these programs that have already passed to talk about it, their program with the community, because the foundation has direct access to the community through the social media accounts, and what better way to show people what's going on in the DAO than to give those who made the proposal and passed to talk about it. So we've done that a few times and we'll continue to do that, as well as just having group chats with these past proposals to help facilitate things that they're trying to do. So basically, there's the separation of the grant programs, but also the foundation will help the other grant programs in whatever way that we can. But for the foundation's grant program, phase 1 is focused on the lifeblood of Arbitrum 1 and Nova, which is dApps, building applications that users can interact with. And so we've obviously have a lot of applications there, a lot of mostly from existing protocols on Arbitrum to continue building their product lines, but also you get a lot of new projects as well that are starting either from scratch or trying to come over from another chain, and using a lot of projects that want to migrate chains or go cross-chain. They'll use grant programs as a way to do that instead of going the VC route or raising money in some other way through a launch. That's a lot more complex than a grant program. In my opinion, I think grant applications are very straightforward, and you either get it or you don't in a very specific time frame. It's not, if you're doing a raise, you obviously have to have consistent meetings and sell yourself over and over, but a grants application is, here's what we're trying to build, here's how much money we need, yes or no, one time, and then maybe apply again down the road.
Okay. And is that open right now to people? I think you said the program started.
It's still open, and we haven't published any of the approved grants yet. There's quite a thorough process there.
Okay. Thorough process of reviewing them and vetting and whatnot before you
exactly.
take the next step.
And the bigger the grant, the more like screening you obviously have to do. And we don't have a specific, if you ask for this much or more, you get this much screening. It's kind of case by case basis, depending on the risk of the app itself, like an analytics platform versus something that has a bunch of smart contracts in it. So it just varies, and it's part of why it takes so long. You have to involve a lot of the specialists on the teams and the people responsible for certain verticals to help out with specific categories who know those areas really well. But you see grants anywhere from $10,000 to over $1 million. Everyone has their different goals, and that's part of why we left it open-ended. We didn't say this is the minimum you can ask for, this is the maximum. We just said, here's the application framework. This is what we're looking for generally in phase 1. We gave a lot of advice through a couple AMAs and some communications as well, such as you think about it as what's a product you want to build in like a 6-month timeline. You wouldn't apply for a grant for a 3-year product timeline. You need a lot more money for that, of course. And then also one of the things that can help founders succeed in the grant applications is basically the way they lay out their budgeting. Let's say you need $10,000. Give us a milestone breakdown of how much you need during each month for which parts of the product. If you don't know those answers, then it's pretty unlikely you'll get approved, because we need to understand why you're getting that money and what you're doing with it at which points.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. You gotta have a plan, and you gotta be able to report to that plan at some level and show that you're delivering value for the grant investment that's been made.
There's a in Web3, if I can say, grant programs have been pretty degenerate, so to speak. You just get money flying off the shelves so easily all over the place. And then a lot of these projects aren't respecting the milestones provided, things like that. So we just wanted to take a more serious approach to the grants program, and we looked at grant programs in other industries and how thorough you really have to be. And I still think we're pretty lenient. It's a pretty straightforward process.
Okay. But moving towards that, getting away from the degeneracy and towards some more structure and control and report and proof and things like that, which is, I think, warranted. Time for us to grow up as an industry a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I won't like name any names, but I'll give an example. I was working at a protocol, and there was a blockchain we met with at a conference, and they just gave us on the spot a bunch of money with no like real application. And then not me, but the protocol ended up not even working with them in the end. So they just basically got free money. And that happens, I think, a lot. Yeah. I think that happens a lot. Here's a bunch of money, build on our chain. No follow-up, no structure in place for anyone to make sure these projects are doing what they set out to do. And we just want to set the standard for the space that we want to exist in. We want to see that space take shape.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's part of what I appreciate about this ecosystem, for sure.
I think what's also worth noting too is that, and this is why, again, I think this ecosystem is so cool, is because obviously, like what Eli just said is a very, very specific take, and it's an opinion at the end of the day, right? Like who's to say that we shouldn't just degenerately just throw money to people, right? But I think that's why it's cool that like I think that's why it's cool that like you have the foundation as an option to get grants, but you also have the options to go strictly through the DAO or through the sub DAOs that people have created to give out grants, right? Yeah, I think that's why it's so cool. I tell everybody, it's as long as you can show the DAO, and that's obviously everyone involved, whether it be in the forums and beyond, off-chain then on-chain with the votes, that what you're doing contributes directly back to the Arbitrum ecosystem. You can get funding in many different ways. And again, especially that being said through the DAO, right? I think that's why the Arbitrum ecosystem like is going to be like one of the biggest DAOs and ecosystems like out there, just because there's so much mind share already. And of course, like previous to the airdrop and obviously previous to the DAO, but now there's even more so because of the extra firepower, if you want to call it that the DAO has, alongside of course the backing that Ethereum provides and whatnot. Yeah, it's really cool, and I'm really interested to see like how much the DAO can scale with that in mind, because like there are literally teams in different regions applying to represent Arbitrum in their region for a nominal amount. I think like the one new question I think was like one in LATAM. They essentially just want to do hackathons, workshops, community events, like all that stuff for about a year, and the DAO would just fund it directly. It's insane.
Yeah,
it really is.
That's awesome. I love that idea, and I think you're making a really interesting point here. Is that we're not long into this journey as it is, and none of us really know how all these investments are going to pay out. And there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things going on, and stuff could start happening really quickly. That kind of unexpected good stuff could start happening really quickly from some of these things and really give us some momentum. So I'm with you. I'm excited to see how some of this stuff plays out. And you made me think of another item that I wanted to touch on here today. Fits in with all this is I noticed an ambassador program on the foundation's website, and I hadn't heard of this before. So if you could, Eli, I assume this is you, can you give us a breakdown? What is this ambassador program, and what's the effort there? Where are you guys at in all of it?
Yeah, so the ambassador program, we're doing it similar to the grant program in phases. There's good reasons for that. One is to give you kind of isolated and specific focus for certain areas, and then also a chance to reiterate on things that maybe didn't work or did work that you could improve upon in the next phase, which is very helpful. And a lot of these phases can also be ongoing while phase 2 launches. Phase 1 is obviously going to keep going. It's not like phase 2 launches and then all the phase 1 ambassadors are gone. No, it's simultaneously operating. And so phase 1 is focused on university blockchain clubs and students at universities and colleges as well. And basically what you want to do there, it has to do with the philosophy of, to get the next 10 million users, you need the next million builders. And one way to get a lot more builders is to work with these university, more research-based like clubs they are very involved in the community in many different ways and levels, but there is a builder economy there and developers involved. Hunter, do you want to add to that as well?
No, yeah, pretty much said it, Eli. Yeah, like literally just in a nutshell, I would almost look at it as twofold, right? Like onboarding people to help spread the Arbitrum vision in any way they see fit. And that applies to people that are like, of course, like really good at their craft, whether it's like creating content on YouTube, having spaces, writing a blog post, etc. And on the other side of that, I see it as like this thing where if you're already contributing to the Arbitrum ecosystem, like why not just have more of a process to reward those kind of people, right? And I think that's that's the coolest thing about the ambassador program, probably. So yeah, definitely really excited to see that.
Okay. Yeah. And you said you're targeting the universities right now. What types of groups do you think you'd be targeting in future phases?
So the university one was to start, or students, and the next one I believe will be community, I guess cohort you could call it, and basically that's anyone in the ecosystem. So that could be our everyday Discord users that are just hanging out. They can start applying as well. And then there'll also be a more technically focused ambassador phase where it's just purely developer based. And you can already start to think of all the ways that those would benefit the ecosystem based on what we've already talked about today. But just to give like a brief example here with the ambassador program now, that those university clubs and students will be able to complete submissions, whether it's community-based, research-based, event-based, things like that.
Okay, very cool. Community meetups. You mentioned the Discord ones could be like remote groups, but people collabing together to push things along. Could be the Philadelphia chapter of the Arbitrum people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just groups of people that want to get together and move
Why
things along.
Philadelphia?
I don't know. It's just thought of a random city.
There's never random. There's always reason.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's super random. I'm in Buffalo. I have no ties to Philadelphia.
That's right.
Nice.
Yeah, a great example of what a successful ambassador program could look like in a best case scenario, is down the road, it's almost like running itself. And these ambassadors have all realized, a bunch of them live in an area, like you said, with a chapter. Yep. And then they start to meet up with other groups. And then this is how a lot of the ETH Global events even came to be, I'm sure. There's so many ETH this city, ETH that city, that some people don't even know about because they're either just getting started or it's just in a part of the world you haven't been to. So it's always interesting to see that.
All right, very cool. Any other big foundation items that we haven't touched on? Any initiatives, anything? What do you want founders to know, or what do you want them to do, or how do you want them to interact or reach out with the foundation?
We've definitely given a lot of avenues for founders to help themselves and get involved, and through the grants program, through participating in the Security Council in whatever way, shape, or form they can, being very aware of what's happening in the DAO. At least once a week, check in on the forum, check in if there's any active voting proposals. Even if you don't have delegated tokens, you can still be like, go back to your team and be like, hey guys, this incentives program is about to be approved in a week through the DAO. How should we prepare for that to get involved? Yep. So just thinking along those lines, and then more directly apply for a grant. One thing I think we haven't talked about as much because we're not in that phase of the ambassador program yet, but I know once we're in the community phase of the ambassador program, a lot of these projects or apps or businesses in the city analogy, they have their own internal ecosystem separate from the macro ecosystem, their own little micro running communities. They should encourage their communities to be ambassadors to help the Arbitrum ecosystem, which then kicks back and helps them out as well.
Yeah, right on, because it becomes their voice. And to stick with that city analogy, that's their, send your people to run for city council, right? And get involved and make sure that they're representing the needs of, you were already talking about, maybe Latin America might have some different views or needs, and Canada might have some different views and needs. So that get those groups out there and represent them that way. I think that's good advice. And then, of course, all kinds of other opportunities. So there's lots of stuff we talked about here today from the foundation that is available to founders, but also from the DAO. We didn't get into it a ton, but you just mentioned the short-term incentive. The grant program just kicked off. That's going to be, was just passed. That's going to be 50 million ARB. There was just domain allocator elections. There is GovMonth going on right now, trying to get people involved. So lots of activity, lots of ways for people to get involved across the Arbitrum ecosystem. And yeah, definitely, it's don't sit on the sidelines. If you care about this stuff and you want to see it going away, find a way to influence it, find a way to get involved. No shortage of opportunities. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming and taking the time here today. I appreciate it. Thank you for all you do for the ecosystem. A lot of us having a lot of fun out here, and a lot of people building apps and building livelihoods on this, on the backs of the work that you all are supporting. So kudos to you. Keep it up. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter @GitSmall, GITSMOL. Learn more at gitsmall.com.